I chose to do my audio presentation on the ongoing feud between the pop star Kesha and her producer Dr. Luke. The original article I chose was one I found in the New York Times entitled Kesha vs. Dr. Luke, Inside Pop Music's Contentious Legal Battle. The link is at the bottom of this slide. An introduction to the case. Kesha is a pop star most well known for her songs "Tick-Tock" and "We Are Who We Are." At the age of 18, Kesha signed a contract with Dr. Luke, a producer of pop music. In 5 years, Dr. Luke turned Kesha into a multi-platinum artist. The parties involved in this case are Kesha Siebert, the singer, and Lucas Gottwald, referred to from here on out as Dr. Luke. There are claims and counterclaims, including a complaint filed by Kesha against Dr. Luke in California, a complaint filed by Dr. Luke against Kesha in New York, and 8 counterclaims filed by Kesha against Dr. Luke in New York. I'll also be referencing a complaint against Kesha and Dr. Luke filed by DAS Communication Management Agency in 2011. First, I'll give some background and a timeline of what triggered the complaints filed by both parties. Kesha was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee by her mother, Peeb Siebert, a singer and songwriter. While she was in high school, Dr. Luke discovered Kesha from a demo CD she sent to multiple record labels throughout the country. At the age of 18, Kesha was encouraged by Dr. Luke to move to LA to pursue her music career. In 2005, Kesha entered into a contract with Dr. Luke, hereby referred to as the Gottwald Agreement. In this contract, she promised Dr. Luke exclusive rights to her music, likeness, management, and career. Under the Gottwald Agreement, Dr. Luke had the rights to produce her first 6 albums. For 3 years after this, Kesha was put on the back burner for Dr. Luke's high-profile clients. In 2008, Kesha thought she got her big break when she provided female vocals for Flo Rida's song Right Round. Right Round became an international hit and hit #1 on the Billboard charts in the United States in 2009. Kesha's vocals were left uncredited at the hands of Dr. Luke, and she has received no compensation nor royalties for this song to this day. In 2010, however, Kesha finally had the opportunity to release her debut album, Animal. The album was certified platinum and sold over 1 million copies in the United States. Her debut single, "Tick-Tock", received multiple platinum certification in over a dozen countries. In 2012, Kesha then released her follow-up album, Warrior. This album was produced by Dr. Luke as well as her debut album. Kesha's career went dormant after this album released. In 2013, Dr. Luke was interviewed by The New Yorker and cited creative differences between Kesha and himself. In 2014, Kesha filed a complaint with the court in Los Angeles, California, where she cited 8 counts of abuse in an attempt to release herself from the contract with Dr. Luke. In October of 2014, Kesha filed a complaint against Dr. Luke with the courts in Los Angeles, California. In this suit, she filed 8 counts against Dr. Luke that are all listed on this slide. In her sexual harassment and battery portion of her complaint, Kesha cited an occasion that Dr. Luke allegedly forced her to snort an illicit drug before getting on a plane together, in which he continuously forced himself on her while she was intoxicated and drugged. Kesha also cited another occasion where, after forcing her to drink with him, Dr. Luke instructed Kesha to take sober pills in order for her to sober up. Kesha alleges she was raped during this occurrence, and the sober pills were actually GHP, which is also known as the date rape drug. In her one account of intentional infliction of emotional distress, Kesha references continuous and ongoing years of sexual, physical, verbal, and emotional abuse at the hands of Dr. Luke. She alludes that because of this abuse, she was forced to seek medical help at a rehab treatment center in Illinois in January of 2014. She was diagnosed with bulimia nervosa, and according to doctors at the facility, she suffered psychological effects caused by Dr. Luke's abuse, resulting in severe depression, post-traumatic stress, social isolation, and panic attacks. She asked the court for an immediate injunction to void her contract with Dr. Luke as well as seek damages for his abuse. In the Gottwald Agreement, however, there was a clause for forum selection that noted that if any disputes were to arise, jurisdiction would reside in New York. That same day that Kesha filed this complaint in Los Angeles, Dr. Luke filed a complaint against her in New York. The court stayed Kesha's complaint in California, pending the results of the complaint filed in New York by Dr. Luke. The same day Kesha filed her complaint against Dr. Luke filed a complaint against Kesha in New York. He also filed against Peeb Siebert, Kesha's mom, and Kesha's new management company, Vector Management, as well as the owner of this company, Jack Rovner, who is her new manager. In this complaint, Dr. Luke lists 3 counts against the parties as follows. In count 1, Dr. Luke cited defamation against Kesha and Peeb Siebert. He states that Kesha and Peeb published false statements concerning Dr. Luke to various third parties. In making these statements, they acted with outrageous dishonesty and malice that deserves punitive damages. The statements made were to injure Dr. Luke's reputation in his business as a music producer. Dr. Luke suffered special damages to his reputation as well as existing and potential business relationships with other artists and record labels. Count 2 cited a breach of contract against Kesha. He argues that the Gottwald recording agreement is a valid contract between Kesha and Dr. Luke. Dr. Luke has fully performed his obligations under this agreement while Kesha has repudiated, or rather rejected, the valid contract. In her repudiation, she refused to comply with her ongoing obligations to deliver sound recordings to Dr. Luke or to allow him to produce her work. Because of her breach of contract, Dr. Luke states that he is entitled to compensatory damages, including expectation and consequential damages. Count 3 listed tortious interference with contractual relations against Peeb, Vector, and Rovner. Dr. Luke says that the Gottwald recording agreement is a valid contract between Kesha and Dr. Luke. Peeb, Vector, and Rovner knew about this contract, and they each intentionally interfered with it. Both parties advised Kesha into repudiating the agreement. As a result of their interference, Kesha was repudiating the agreement and otherwise refused to perform under the contract. Dr. Luke claims that if it were not for the wrongful interference, Kesha would not have breached the contract, and as a result, Dr. Luke suffered damages in which he is due. There was a decision and order released on behalf of the tortious interference against Peeb, Vector, and Rovner. All complaints against Peeb were dismissed because New York courts do not have jurisdiction over her because she does business in, owns property in, and resides in Nashville, Tennessee. The Gottwald Agreement clause does not bind her as she did not sign nor was she mentioned in this contract. All complaints against Rovner, Vector, Management were dismissed because the law states that where an agent acts within the scope of its authority, acts in good faith, and does not commit independent torts or predatory acts, he cannot be held liable for inducting his principal's breach of contract. Rovner and Vector acted within their scope as a management agency to try to get a better deal for Kesha. 4 days after Dr. Luke filed a complaint in the New York courts against Kesha, Kesha filed 8 counterclaims against Dr. Luke, and they are all listed on this slide. In April of 2015, though, the judge ruled on Kesha's counterclaims. The 2nd, 4th, and 5th counterclaims were dismissed because the actions listed in these counterclaims took place in California, so there's no jurisdiction in New York. The 3rd and 6th counterclaims were dismissed because Kesha failed to allege gender-motivated violence within her claims, as well as the statute of limitations reaching on the actions made in the claims. The 7th counterclaim was dismissed as well because the statute of limitations was reached, and the 8th counterclaim was dismissed. The counterclaim noted that the contract is void because Dr. Luke terminated the contract when he sued for money damages rather than specific performance. In their contract, there is a clause that states they can only sue for specific performance or for her to complete her contractual obligations, rather than sue for monetary damages. This counterclaim was dismissed because the courts decided that he is due both monetary damages as well as specific damages due to the breach of contract. Kesha also filed a leave to amend where she asks the court's permission to correct her counterclaim so the cause of action is legitimate in order to withhold rulings she is seeking. Her leave to amend was denied, and she cannot continue litigation on these charges in the state of New York. Kesha was granted a preliminary injunction in February 2016, however, that she is not required to record in the same room as Dr. Luke, although her contract is still valid. In 2011, Das Communication, Kesha's former management company, sued Kesha and Dr. Luke for Kesha's breach of contract, Dr. Luke's wrongful interference of their contract, and accrued damages as a result of the breach. This lawsuit only relates to the case we are speaking about because she gave a deposition during this lawsuit which was partially unsealed for Dr. Luke's defense against Kesha's abuse claims. During this deposition, Kesha states that Dr. Luke never gave her drugs, never gave her a roofie, never had an intimate relationship with her, and Dr. Luke never made sexual advances towards her. In giving this deposition, Kesha swore under oath that these events did not transpire. This makes her lawsuit in California and her counterclaims in New York untrue. Now I'm going to review the different parts of the case and how they relate to the law. A tort is a civil wrong that results in harm or injury to another. The purpose of tort law is to compensate those that have suffered a loss due to somebody else's wrongful conduct. There are a variety of different types of intentional torts. In this case, we were exposed to intentional torts including assault, battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress in Kesha's claims against Dr. Luke. Defamation and tortious interference are also intentional torts that we were exposed to in this case. Dr. Luke cited both of these torts against Kesha, her mother, and her management agency. Defamation is defined as anything published or publicly spoken that causes injury to another's good name, reputation, or character. Dr. Luke claimed Kesha and her mother were engaging in a smear campaign of false accusations against him that were hindering his ability to maintain current and accrue new clients. Tortious interference occurs when someone wrongfully interferes with a contractual or business relationship. A defense to this tort would be that the action was justified or permissible in common business practices. A defense to this tort would be that the action was. This was the case for Kesha's management agency, as the court dismissed this claim as it was within the realm of a management company to find and negotiate a better deal for their client. Negligence is an unintentional tort that Kesha accused Dr. Luke and his record label of in her complaint. Negligence requires the elements of a required duty of care, breach, causation, and damages. There's a duty of professionals in which they have a duty of care towards their clients. Kesha is claiming Dr. Luke and his record label breached this duty of care. Within international contracts, there are contract clauses such as forum selection. This clause gives jurisdiction in the contract in case disputes arise. In the Gottwald Agreement, the forum selection was for the state of New York, which stayed Kesha's original complaint filed in California. In this case, we also touched upon contract law. A contract is defined as a promise for the breach of which the law provides a remedy, and it has the required elements of agreement, consideration, contractual capacity, and legality. Contracts have certain forms, and in the case of the Gottwald Agreement is a bilateral contract where there are promises on both sides. A contract is also has different performances, including executed contract, which is fully performed by both parties, or an executory contract in which it has not been fully performed, such as the Gottwald Agreement. A contract can be discharged in multiple ways, including a breach. Anticipatory repudiation is defined as an assertion or action by a party indicating that he or she will not perform an obligation that the party is contractually obligated to perform at a future time. Kesha performed this when she initially told Dr. Luke she was not going to carry out the contract before she took the matter to court. There are multiple types of damages that can be sued for in a civil case, including the following. Compensatory damages, which are direct losses and costs. These include specific damages, which can be actually counted, and general damages, which are non-monetary damages, and this value is determined by the court. Both parties sued for these damages. Consequential damages are indirect foreseeable losses, and Dr. Luke sues Kesha for this in his claim for defamation, resulting in his loss of business in the music industry. Punitive damages are meant to punish and deter wrongdoing. Both parties sued for these damages as well. Specific performance is part of a contract that, in the event of dispute, the contract is fulfilled instead of receiving damages. The Gottwald Agreement includes a clause that says Dr. Luke will sue for specific damages, for specific performance, and Kesha will complete her contract of 6 albums as opposed to money losses in the event of a breach of contract. Kesha mentions this in her counterclaim in which she was denied. The outcome of the case is as follows. The trial in New York is still ongoing. As of late January 2017, documents were still being filed on the case with the Supreme Court of New York. Kesha is still under contract with Dr. Luke and cannot record and release music without his permission and production. The court initially ordered Kesha and Dr. Luke's legal counsel to discuss a settlement in private chambers for January 30th, 2017. Settlement discussions did not go well, and both Kesha and Luke sought permission from the court to update their claims. Kesha's legal team is seeking release from her contract under California's 7-year rule, which lets artists out of their contracts after 7 years in order to avoid any potential exploitation. Although the case is occurring in New York, Kesha's lawyers are requesting the judge abide by California law. You can go to the website listed at the bottom of the slide in order to obtain any documents filed in any case in the New York Supreme Court. This includes all of the original complaints, counterclaims, and orders and decisions of this case. And this slide contains the references used in making this presentation.